Hey, good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Morning,
Morning.
Marianne. Morning, Justin. How you guys
Morning.
doing today?
Pretty
Good.
good.
Excellent, excellent. We have a really exciting, I don't know if exciting is the right word, but kind of interesting
I'm
topic.
excited.
I'm excited. I'm excited because we spend a lot of time on it in ways that we kind of don't realize, and anything you spend time on is important and sort of exciting. So today's our stream today is around governance of data in the cloud, specifically about responsibility. Like, what's the responsibility of the cloud provider? What's the responsibility of the end user? And I think that's really kind of like a fuzzy area and one that we have add some definition to. But before we dive into that, I also want to thank the Valiant team as a whole. We won yesterday. We were put on a pretty significant MSP list, the MSP 501 for Channel Futures. So I want to give a big thank you to the Channel Futures team and to the Valiant team for making us, it was a great MSP, and I really appreciate the recognition by the industry, and the team really exemplifies the ethos of what Channel Futures brings to businesses, the MSP community, that sort of thing. So really appreciate it. And so without any further ado, let's dive into some data governance. So and in the spirit of keeping these moving along, I'm going to hand over the reins to Marianne, who keeps us on track and definitely on point with this. So Marianne, take us away.
Great. Yeah, so first we want to talk about like what is the shared responsibility. I know you briefly
Mhm.
mentioned it, but exactly what we're talking about with the different services in the cloud. And I'll just say, I mean, basically you still own your data and you still have responsibility. You can't just get a cloud service and then hands off, everything's not me. So it's
Right.
important to understand where their service ends and where your responsibility begins.
Mhm.
Um, I know in here it says generally they are responsible for integrity and you are responsible for quality. Do either of you guys want to define that a little more for me?
Yeah. So when you put your data into a cloud service, they're providing you, and so they providing you with whatever that service is, and they're saying like, yeah, we're gonna protect the data from us screwing it up. So if you put it in, let's go with Dropbox. Dropbox says we're going to protect your data from us screwing it up. The integrity of your data is safe, but the content of your data or the quality of your data, that's up to you. If you
Right.
if you delete a file and tell Dropbox I'm deleting this file, they're going to delete the file because that's what it does. Or
Yeah.
if
Sure.
you go in and overwrite a file, and there's stuff in versioning and things like that, but ultimately it's if you tell the cloud provider to do something, they're going to do it, and they're not going to protect you from yourself. They'll protect you from them,
Sure.
not from yourself.
And
Yeah.
also that's could be accidental or
Mhm.
even on purpose, but then you realized you shouldn't have, or it could be malicious. So
Mhm.
there's
Correct.
also that
Absolutely.
Yeah.
factor to think about. Always security comes into play everywhere.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I mean, just kind of go back to that CII triad. This really hits on all three parts of it: of
Mhm.
confidentiality, integrity,
Mhm.
and accountability. So
Yeah,
because
so check out our YouTube if you want to learn more about that. We're
yes,
gonna we're
all
gonna push through though and
right, all right, thanks, Marianne.
get
All
on top of it.
right, perfect.
But yes,
Tell me
so check out our
monologuing.
live streams. No, I mean it's super fascinating, so definitely check it out.
Yeah,
But
Mhm.
so just to give you guys an example, let's talk about the different service types.
sure.
So I think the first one we want to talk about is private cloud,
Mhm.
which is a lot of people think of it as things like on-premise server or if you have something in a data center. So Justin, you want to give me a little bit more about that
Yeah.
one?
So yeah, this is pretty much when you own your own equipment. So if you've got a server in your office, that's technically private cloud because it's
Mhm.
your equipment, and you have all of the responsibility to manage the entire thing, everything. We're talking about down to the level of making sure it's plugged in, making sure there's power, making sure all of that. You own
That's
all of
cool.
that,
Environmental,
and yeah, everything.
very
So if you
important.
look on the chart, everything from the baseline, the data storage, everything all the way up through to access. It's private, it's yours, you own it, you could do whatever you want with it. There's no rules, but you're responsible for the whole thing.
Yeah. Cool. So then the next one on our column is infrastructure. So it's
Mhm.
infrastructure as a service. What does that involve, and what are the responsibilities in that?
So this is the when you think of a server running in the cloud, so when you think
Mhm.
of, you've spun up a server at AWS or Azure and you can log in, that's infrastructure as a service. The provider is taking care of the underlying pieces for it, and giving you a server that you can work on. And you think about like the older hosting, like the virtual private servers for web hosting, those sorts of things fall into this category where you don't have to worry about the hardware, you don't have to worry about the networking, but at the level of the server environment itself, like running updates and managing it, that's all stuff that you would own at that point.
Okay. Yeah. So it's basically you're having your server, but someone else is hosting it.
Yeah, pretty much. It's
Okay.
you have the server part, but you don't have to worry about the hardware part.
Cool.
Or
So
the
no server room. Don't have to deal with HVAC.
Yeah.
Correct. No HVAC, exactly.
Whew.
Or generators.
Yeah.
Yes. Cool. So the next one I have is platform as a service,
Hmm.
which is very interesting. So this is more on applications, less on server structure,
Yeah,
right?
this sort of is in the middle, and this is one of the exciting pieces about working in cloud and setting stuff up for cloud, but also one of the ones that a lot of small businesses don't interact with a lot.
Mhm.
If you're a developer, this is where your bread and butter is where you're going to live. And the
Right.
idea here is that as a developer, you're working on your code, you're building your application, and anything other than your application, you don't really want to be responsible for. So, platform as a service gets says you don't have to worry about the operating system, you don't have to worry about the server. That's all taken care of. You just have to write your code, and you're given an environment that runs your code.
Mhm.
And that's where you start to see a lot of savings in cloud for applications that are written this way, because they're geared specifically to run in cloud.
Cool. And then the one that I think more people are familiar with that small to medium businesses are definitely going to be using, software as a service.
Hmm.
Right.
So
Yeah,
this is
absolutely.
your Office 365, your QuickBooks Online, even simple things like Netflix,
Yep.
right?
Hmm.
Because it's just
Absolutely.
cool.
Yeah. Anytime you're getting a service or a product from the cloud, from a website, from something like that, it's going to be software as a service. And this is, I think, the like by far the most common cloud tools that small medium businesses use.
Hmm.
Yep.
And you can see from the chart that obviously a lot of the responsibility gets taken off your shoulders, which is
Mhm.
great if you don't have the people who can maintain all that stuff.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's like stuff.
So yeah, think about like using Dropbox, using OneDrive, Google Drive, even just using email services. You're putting your data in, you're doing that work, but you're not
Mhm.
really concerned with the underlying piece of it. You don't really care how many servers
Sure.
Google
Yeah.
has running to run your
Right.
Gmail. You just care that when you go to the gmail.com, your email pops up, and
Yeah.
that
Yes.
pretty much
And
sums that up.
yeah, and it really takes advantage of economy of scale as
Mhm.
as it gets bigger and bigger. These cloud providers get more and more redundancy and more and
Mhm.
more.
Hmm.
So it makes a lot of sense for a lot of businesses. And just
Yeah.
it had its background in application service providers many years ago. So
Yeah.
that's an old term, but kind of still applicable. All right. So anyway, what's next?
Well, actually, that's a great segue because we
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about when you are trying to determine the right service for you.
Mhm.
What are the different? I mean, there's always a variety of variables that get put into your decision making, and obviously, people think about cost, but cost gets affected based on what you have. So, if
Mhm.
either of you guys want to touch on that, like just briefly,
Yeah, I mean,
what
that's
people have to look
pretty much
for.
exactly what George has said. The
Yeah.
economy of scale comes into it, and you see an inverse relationship between responsibility and cost. The more that you are responsible for, the higher the freedom you have with it, but also the higher the cost. So
Right.
private cloud is going to be the most costly because you are, and for most, and this is always outlier cases, but
Hmm.
generally speaking, private cloud is going to be the most costly because you're going to have to build all the infrastructure that's there
Eh,
versus a cloud provider has that infrastructure already, so they can leverage that.
Sure.
Also, I think the thing of private cloud is there's a lot of hidden costs that
Hmm.
people don't take into account. They're like, well, if I buy a server, I'm done. But there's
No,
like,
it's maintenance and
yeah,
update
I
of
think yeah, exactly.
licensing.
The rule of thumb is usually like whatever the cost of something, it's like usually 3 to 4x
Hmm.
of your cost to maintain it over time. So that's let's do that kind of simple math.
Yeah, and it's
and then-
also different for different businesses, right? Because
Right.
the example I like is most small to medium businesses do not host their own email anymore. It's much
Mm-mm.
easier to just pay a couple bucks a month per
Right.
person to get email, and then you don't have to worry like power goes out in my building, I don't have email.
Yeah.
But there are still big companies that do that because just it's more cost effective, because if you're paying a couple bucks a month for 100,000 employees.
Yeah, it's a fast.
Yeah, and a lot of times it comes down to what you already have. If you are a large corporation and you've got a data center that you're already paying for, then, well, yeah, I could throw a couple of servers in there and that's cheaper. If you're a small, medium business, you're
startup.
not maintaining a data center in your office. And to try, I mean, even if you want, I mean, we're talking multiple ISP lines now you have to bring in, because if the internet goes down, your service doesn't work. You
Right.
need redundant power, because if power goes down, your service doesn't work. You need all the layers on top of it. So
Yeah.
it's private cloud. Yeah, you get the freedom to do whatever you want with it in that, and you can build stuff out like that. But you're going to pay for that to do it. You're also responsible for everything. So a hard drive fails in that server that you put in to run your email, that's your responsibility to fix.
Yeah.
So,
Correct.
So I mean, you're going to need the equipment, you're going to need the environment, you're going to need the staff, and you're going to still need to be paying for software regularly, because even just like licensing and updating the software and all that stuff.
So the next jump from there is into the infrastructure as a service, and that even if is why we see a lot of the first steps into cloud is to move from that, because you've got a server that runs on premise, and it's like, well, I'm just gonna take that server that runs on premise and put it in the cloud, and you're removing the responsibility of that underlying the hardware, of the networking, of all of those pieces and transferring that responsibility to cloud provider. And because they can do those things more efficiently, there are cost savings for them, again, depending on the use case and what you're doing. But you're still responsible at that point for maintaining the operating system. You have to run updates, you have to install software, you have to make sure that the tools that you're running on those servers work the way that you want them to. The cloud provider isn't going to take care of that at all. They're
and that your data
you
is secure and backed up and everything.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's all the backup that you have to do in a private cloud, you still have to do in infrastructure as a service, because it's none of that is included. And you're protected from, the hard drive failing in a server isn't going to cause any downtime or outages for your system. But if your software, if you're a server, someone deletes a file, it's gone. I mean, you have to build those things into it.
Yeah, and even at times, the basic snapshotting functionality is not nearly enough to protect the data in a lot of infrastructure service solutions. People are like, well, I'll snapshot it every day and that'll be fine. May not be acceptable based on your level of churn, how your data is utilized, if it's a database. There's so many different variables. So there is a bit of like customization required there.
And as we go up the chart again, giving more responsibility, the next one, platform as a service. This really is, again, and it's meant more for developers, more for development tools. It's been referred to as called serverless environment, which is not really accurate because it's not a server. But from the point of view of the you developing and writing code, you don't have to worry about servers anymore. It takes the role of like a DevOps of having to build a server, maintain a server, put it where you're going to put it, and then write your application on top of it. All that stuff goes away. You can just write your application and say, commit this to this infrastructure that just runs code. And with that, you get a lot of cost savings because you get billed when you're running that code, not necessarily all the time. But applications have to be written specifically for this. So you can't just take a program that you have and say, well, I'm just going to put it into a platform and just upload that in. I mean, if you're used to, double clicking to run the program, it's probably not going to work there. A developer would have to build it.
Yeah.
But if you have a custom application that's been built in-house by somebody and they're going to develop the next version, this might be a great way to get it into cloud and to save costs.
Yep, absolutely.
But because of that, the jump really for small medium businesses either from infrastructure as a service or to the last one is software as a
Software
service.
service, yes.
And that's I think the biggest one that people are most familiar with. This is, all of your Office 365, G Suite, Netflix, QuickBooks Online, anything that you're going to
Salesforce.
interact with that's a really it's a product that you're getting direct access to that you're using. Salesforce falls into this
Yeah.
category
Yes.
where
Mhm.
even though that's sort of a platform that you can build things on, it really is, here's the thing that the cloud provider is giving you and you're responsible for the stuff in it.
Sure.
And
So
at
when
that
it comes to
Mhm.
responsibility, actually, Matt, if you can bring that chart back up, it looks like for software as a service, it's just you are only responsible for data and access. So what is
Mhm.
that involved?
Ah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the two big pieces of that, data and access. So if you've got, let's say, I want to go back to Office 365. You've got Office 365 set up. You're responsible for the files that you put into it or the email content that's there, and for setting up users and giving them access to it. So Microsoft says, here's your OneDrive, here's your SharePoint. If you put files into it, they're there. You're responsible for putting those files there and working on those files. And
Not accidentally
let's
deleting them, you know.
not deleting them, not crypto lockering them.
Yes.
Or even giving someone the wrong access because
Yeah.
was it access control can be let's just say not simple.
Yeah.
For lack of a better way of
Yeah, and
putting
then
it.
the other piece of it is
Yeah.
that if you put a file, let's say I take a sensitive HR file and put it into OneDrive or SharePoint, and our company policy may be that that's totally acceptable. But if I put it into a place that everybody has access to, and it was only supposed to be a certain number of people that have access to it,
Mhm.
that's not the cloud provider's responsibility to do that. That's you as the data owner's responsibility to
You're the
do
one
that.
setting permissions and you're the one making
Exactly.
sure that those
Right.
permissions are
Yeah. So if
enforced
you
and you're
call
not,
Microsoft and say, "Hey, the intern looked at my HR files," they're going to say, "Well, yeah, because you put it in the intern folder, so they have access to that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Right.
You let
That's
the
on
intern
you."
have access to every single
Right.
folder.
Mhm.
Like, so that is important when you're setting this stuff up, that you actually pay attention to structure, you pay attention to permissions and confidentiality and everything like that.
Unfortunately, we've seen this in the real world where the data access for a Google, particularly the one I'm thinking of, is a Google Drive access,
Mm.
was like this, like person left the company and it's exposed, literally exposed to the
Mhm.
entire organization, payroll data, contracts, things that are absolutely,
Mhm.
So I think that this is like a much more in-depth conversation than obviously this
Yeah.
this webinar, but
Yeah. And also think about security, not just what's accessible, but like if people have weak passwords, that's not Microsoft's responsibility if you have a breach
Right.
through your weak passwords. So
Mhm.
that's also your responsibility.
Mhm.
So follow security
Yes.
best practices.
Exactly. Yes, right. MFA, password,
Yes.
the whole nine. Always.
Yes, which you can learn about more at our YouTube channel.
Yes, please watch it. Check
Like,
it out.
review, subscribe. Anyway,
Thank you very
but we
perfect.
talked about, oh, it looks like we have a comment coming in. So let's take a look at that before we move on to the next segment.
Sure.
Stefan says, with many businesses staying remote for a majority of their staff and technology changes so quickly, do you think some of the higher end solutions will start to fall into mainstream availability?
Yeah, I think we're going to see more tools move from custom built into the SaaS. Whereas
Yeah.
in the past, if you had a very custom application that you ran, let's say you had, I don't know, had a developer that built a line of business application for you, that would have to be done in a platform as a service or on a server as infrastructure as a service.
Correct.
And I think as those become more ubiquitous, we're going to see them as just software as a service, as just services that you can sign up for. That rather than having to run your own server or build your own application, it'd be just a web page you go to, just a tool that you use, and you may end up with lots of different tools and lots of different pieces to manage, but each one is a specific thing that can do a specific job better than
I-
a
Yeah,
server.
well, even the I mean, if I'm thinking about, you could have infrastructure as a service or even your private cloud, and people would in the past be more likely to be VPNing in. But if so many people are accessing,
Mhm.
honestly, if having a cloud-based storage like like Office 365, like Google
Mhm.
Drive, Team Drives, it makes it much easier for people to work remotely. So
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, it goes into more, and those apps lend us to be more mobile, which is what's going to be the case. Is people are going to be working wherever they're going to be working. We don't know where they're going to. We have no idea where they're going to be, and we kind of don't really care. I think that's really the key.
I think one great example of that is going from a in on-premise or even like a hosted phone system to a VoIP system,
Sure.
where
Great
that
example.
is in some ways that is software as a service. That is a service that you're getting from from the cloud. You're getting the voice service. You don't need to worry about the hardware of the system to manage it, or the hardware of the handsets and all of those
Right.
things. And I
Oh
think
yeah.
things like that, we're going to start to see more of that becoming mainstream. That
Yeah, and
when it
we've
Yeah.
got
comes,
we've got that and we've been using it since so many people had to work from home, but we are very much, people call in, we've been able to do it. Not People don't even need to have a phone. They do it from their computer.
Mhm.
So that's
Correct.
really cool when you have that service.
Yeah.
Um,
Good.
cool. But so we talked about, the caveats and what you're responsible for. And even with software as a service, you're responsible for so much to make sure
Mhm.
that your data is maintained and the access is restricted. So let's talk about how to protect your data.
Mhm.
But I want to we're going to focus on infrastructure as a service and software as a service because those are really the ones that small to medium businesses
Mhm.
are going to be using. So
Yeah,
Yep.
let's talk about infrastructure as a service first.
sure.
Sure.
So with infrastructure services, there's a couple things that I'd say really three big areas of things that you want to take into consideration. The first is before you deploy anything, and that's in the design. And
Mhm.
even though it's in the cloud, that doesn't mean that it, at the end of the day, it is still running on equipment. It's still running on a server. It's still running on hardware, and you want to make sure that you are uh, protecting that data the same way that you would protect it if you had it in your office. So if you are putting a server cloud, you want to make sure that you've got a backup of that server running regularly, and that you know that you can restore back from that if you need to. In addition to backup, you want to make sure that you are planning it in a way so that it stays online. If it's something that needs to be running all the time, if it goes offline, if you're, there, really the question is what's your tolerance for downtime. If it's something that
Right.
needs to be running all the time, you can't rely on just that, well, it's in the cloud so it should never go down. That's even not emergencies, just standard maintenance can happen within a
Mhm.
cloud environment. There are SLAs for cloud services, but they're not 100%. There's acceptable downtime that is like, hey, this
Yes.
system's going down for updates. So you need to build your system both to protect against that, and that could be using things like availability groups or load balancing between different regions, or it could be building in a business continuity plan where the server is replicated to somewhere else so that you can
Mhm.
get things back to it. The second, and that's really I guess that was one and two, is make sure that you have
Yeah.
the backup, and that in your design you have the business continuity piece for it. The
Right.
last one is you still need to manage that server just like you would if it was a server in your office. So that means
Mhm.
making sure it's got antivirus, making sure you're running the updates, checking to make sure that it's secure and locked down. And in some ways, being in the cloud can be more secure, and in some ways it can be less secure. In the ways that it can be more secure is certainly the physical security is much better, the internet access is much better. But if you have a server that you put up in the cloud and you leave it completely open to the internet, it's just as bad as having a server in your office with no firewall. So you need to build
Mhm.
those
It's
same pieces into it.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think people get really complacent too. Think,
Mhm.
well, it's up in the cloud, I don't have to worry about it, and it's simple. And it also, just to go back to the identity thing, you're still responsible for all the identity, access control,
Mhm.
Yeah.
logging, all the pieces that are still
Security
there, security
updates
updates,
and
everything, the whole
Yeah.
end to end. So it's really, it's not something you can. It's not like the Ron Popeil set and forget.
Yeah.
It's like
yes.
you really have to kind of stay on top of it, and manage it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The closer to the set and forget is software as a service, is a lot more set and forget, because a lot of it is maintained from the provider.
Hmm.
But there still are two, as I said, two very important things that you still own, and that's data and access to that data.
Mhm.
And with the data piece, it's important that you have some level of backup on that software. If it's something that's critical, something that you need to make sure that you have a way of getting access to that if there's a problem with the service. And in some cases, this is using cloud protection tools to back up the data. A lot for email and OneDrive and Google Drive, where you're taking that data and you're backing it up out of the environment completely. So if there's a problem with the account, if there's a problem with the data, if there's a problem with the user, you can restore that data back.
So I know
Mhm.
Office 365 and Google Drive, and I'm sure Dropbox and everyone, they do have ways to restore sometimes, like
Mhm.
versioning and things like that. But I also know that that's not always enough. And can you go into that a little more?
Yeah, definitely. So versioning is super useful. I use it all the time for stuff I'm working on because we'll make changes and roll back and compare. And
Mhm.
even if a file's deleted, that's happened to us too. It's easy enough to go back and find it
Restore it. Yeah.
in a certain period of time. If you've got, let's say, 30 days protection on it and there's a project that you work on twice a year, if you come back to that 6 months later, it's gone and it's gone. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
if you know that you've got something that needs to be protected, you'd want to have that backed up
Yeah.
and protected as well.
And it can be done really easily too. Sometimes the mistakes are made on like archival folders or data that you don't touch
Mhm.
very often, and it could be like just something that, like, and it is 30 days expires and it's truly gone.
Yeah.
That's the fear, is that
Yeah. The other one is user data. There are tools in, especially in 365 and G Suite, where you can do litigation holds or you can do like archive holds on mailboxes. But if you delete those users and get rid of that data, it may not be kept any longer. And if it's something that you don't know that you're going to need, or you just want to make sure that you have, it can be a lot more cost effective to have that in a backup system rather than in the live system. So
right.
if we needed to delete a user's account and they're paying $20 a month versus whatever the backup cost is going to be, he's like, okay, it's cheaper to have them just live in the backup. The user's not around. And if we have to get their content back, we'll
Yeah.
set up a user and restore. This
Restore
is
it,
the
right.
other real piece for it, is that if you find that, again, to go with George's anecdote from before, a user had access to all this data and that you thought was in a public share, but really it was just that user's folder, and now they're deleted and gone. And
Yeah.
somebody goes to check and say, "Hey, where is that spreadsheet that I need
Yeah.
for the meeting tomorrow?" Gone. So you want to
Yeah.
have backup on that.
Yeah. It's really and it's so easy to do that it just happens, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
And there's no, and if you don't have all the alerting and logging and
Mhm.
kind of data protections in place, or you'll never know that it happened until it's
Mhm.
way too late, and then it's truly way too late because there's no way to get it back at
Yeah.
Yeah.
all. We've asked a couple of times over the
Yeah.
years.
It's come up,
Yes.
and once
It has
it's
come
once
up.
it's gone, it's gone.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the other piece that also is super critical is maintaining the identity security. And I'm
Right.
not going to go too deep into it because I know we're running a little over. But
Yep.
But security
the
is my favorite topic. Okay.
I it's important. It's
Yes.
It is.
the idea here is, like we were saying before, is combination of making sure that you have data access to data by the right people, or uh, similar to that, making sure that your user accounts are safe. So
Mhm.
MFA, super, super big, because
Yes.
if I've got all my data in Office 365, that makes my Office 365 login very, very valuable for somebody that wants to get access to that data. So I need to
Absolutely.
do things to protect that. I need to make sure that I have a strong password. I need to make sure I have MFA. And on top of that, I need to uh, log and monitor my access. So doing things like having a security tool that can tell you, okay, you logged in from New York and then you logged in from California. That's a little suspicious. Maybe we should prompt you for MFA again just to make sure. Or
Mhm.
you're logging in at 3 a.m. You never log in at 3 a.m. Maybe this time, maybe we need to ask you your security questions to make
Mhm.
sure that it's really you. Those sorts of things.
Or the
Um,
classic, you're logging from a new device. This is actually your device. Like,
yeah. Yep. So
Yeah.
all of those things, you definitely want to have that security layer on it. because those accounts become a target because they know that it's
Yep.
got access to everything.
Cool. So I think basically, it's important to know what your responsibility is regarding, when you do have these services, and make sure you know that nothing's actually really set and forget. Make sure that you are protecting your things. And some of the biggest things are for especially SaaS, because that's what software as a service, what most people are going to use. Make sure that you maintain good identity security and back that up.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Great. I think we beat this one to death. And it's
Yeah.
great. There's a lot of good. As I was saying, when we do a little run through. I love these overlays. Kind of explain this in probably the best way possible. I told me we'll have a blog out around it. And thank you. This is really super important. JP, thanks for putting this together. Marion, thank you for moderating us. It's always useful. I know it's a chore. And it's great. I really appreciate this.
We're the unmoderatable.
No, she does a great. It keeps us moving and
Yeah,
in
definitely.
perspective. And so please like and subscribe. Our YouTube page. It really helps us to get. And also, if you have any questions or thoughts or comments, please send them up there. Next week, we're working on the protecting business data and using the cloud to get it done in various different ways. And once again, if you have questions, send it to us. And I really appreciate everyone's hard work. And talk to you soon. All right, thanks. Have a good day.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye-bye.